Hi everyone, I am Rahul Kumar. Now, recently an ordinance was promulgated by the Indian President giving the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi power to over service of National Capital Territory. The ordinance established a National Capital Civil Services Authority consisting of the Chief Minister and two senior IS officers, allowing them to decide the matters through the majority voting. Critics argue that this move effectively creates a situation where the elected Chief Minister's view can potentially to be overruled. So let's look in detail. Now, so what are ordinances in Indian polity? Article 123 of the Constitution, India grants the President of certain law-making power to promulgate ordinance when either of the two houses of the Parliament is not in sessions to the in urgent situation. Hence, it is not possible for the ordinance to be issued by Parliament. When an ordinance is promulgated but the legislative session is yet to commence, the ordinance remains effect as a law. It has same as force to effect as act of the legislatures, but it requires substantial ratification by the Parliament within 6 months to its reassembly. An ordinance promulgated by the President has maximum validity of 6 months and 6 weeks from the date of its promulgation. So it is important to prelims point of view. Now, the governor of the states can issue ordinance under Article 213 of the Indian Constitution when the state legislative assembly is not in session. So you should remember this fact. If the two houses of the states session on a different dates, the later date is considered. Article 123 for central government and 213 for state legislature. Now, enactment on ordinance. In the process of enacting an ordinance, the decision to bring forth of the ordinance lies with the government. The President acts as an advice of Council of Ministers. If the President deems it necessary, he may return the Cabinet recommendation for the reconsideration. However, if it sent back with or without reconsideration, the President must promulgate it. Now, withdrawal of ordinance. The President can withdraw an ordinance and both the houses of the Parliament can pass through resolution to disapprove it, potentially leading to its lapse. Rejection of an ordinance would, however, imply that the government has lost majority. So, you must be noted. However, if the ordinance enacts a law that falls outside the purview of Parliament's competence and it is considered as void. Now, look, re-promulgation of ordinance. So, when an ordinance lapses, the government can choose re-promulgates if necessary. In a 2017 case, the Supreme Court ruled that the repeated re-promulgations without legislative consideration would be unconstitutional and violation of legislature's role. The court emphasizes that the power to issue ordinance should be treated as an emergency measure and not as the means of bypass the legislatures. One thing you should be noted that an ordinance, like any other legislation, can be retrospective. That is, it comes into force from back date. It may also modify or repeal any act of Parliament or another ordinance. So let's look advantages and disadvantages of ordinance. Advantages: they allow a quick and effective action on urgent matters. Disadvantages: they bypass the democratic process of lawmaking and reduce parliamentary oversight. Second advantage: they enable policy implementation without legislative hurdle. Disadvantage: they undermines the principle of separation of power and encroach the domain of legislature. Third advantage is they provide legal certainty and clarity in case of judicial gap and ambiguity. Disadvantage: they create legal instability as they create temporary and subject to change or repeal. Fourth advantage is they reflect the responsiveness and accountability of the executive branch. Disadvantage: they may be misused for political personal gains or avoid public scrutiny or debate. Now, what are the other judicial pronouncements of ordinance? R.C. Cooper versus Union of India 1920. In case of challenged by the banking company's acquisition and transfer of undertaking ordinance 1969, which nationalized 14 major banks in India, the Supreme Court held that the President's satisfaction regarding to the necessary ordinance not from judicial review and can be changed. The court also held that the ordinance is subject to same constitutional limitations and Act of Parliament and cannot violate the fundamental right or other provisions of the Constitution. Second case is A.K. Roy versus Union of India 1982. In this case, challenged the National Security Ordinance 1980, which provide for preventive detention of person for up to 1 year without trial. The Supreme Court upheld the validity of the ordinance but laid down same safeguards of operations, such as periodic review by an advisory board, communication of grounds of detention to detainee, and opportunity for representation against detention. The court also observed that the ordinance should not be used as substitute to parliamentary legislation. So this line is important, and should be restored only the case of extreme urgency and unforeseen emergency. Third case is DC Wadhwa versus State of Bihar 1987. In case challenged by the series of ordinances issued by the Governor of Bihar between 1967 and 1981 on various subjects, some of which were promulgated by the several times without being placed before the state legislature, the Supreme Court struck down all the ordinances as unconstitutional and held that re-promulgation of ordinance is a fraud of unconstitutions and subversions of democratic legislative process. The court also held that ordinance lapse automatically if it is not approved by the legislature within 6 months. So 6 weeks, it is important for its reassembly and cannot be continued for re-promulgations. So if you want to download this PDF, please check in the description box, and thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, share, like and comment.